Welcome to the Wheel of Time Season 3, Episode 7, Raw Reaction. I am once again alone, not because my husband is sick, but because he is sleepy and didn't really like this episode and said that he had little to say about it. So, gives you a bit of a preview for how things are going to go. I'm really disappointed because I was really hoping that this episode was going to nail it. This is the Pear and Goldeneyes episode. It's not suffering from choppiness, jumping between a whole bunch of groups. It's just one story taking place, and it has a lot of climactic moments. It has some great action sequences. There's source material from the book that is very easy to draw from. So it really should have been something that this TV crew could hit out of the park, and it just wasn't for me. And I know that a lot of people disagree. I'm reading the forums. I see how many people seem to really like this season. They think season 3 is action-packed, and it is that, and it has a lot going for it. So I have to try to figure out what it was about this episode that wasn't hitting. The way the narrative was constructed didn't create payoff moments that felt earned. So let's go through it scene by scene, and I will just once again give you my raw reactions. These are not deeply thought about critical analysis. I will do that or more of that at the end of the season when I look back and see how the whole season hangs together. These are just my thoughts upon having just watched it. So let's get started. This episode starts off with a recap of scenes from previous seasons in which the Tuathawan are introduced, and there are these themes that are coming through about peace versus war, and when it is worth fighting in order to survive versus upholding some kind of a value system that is anti-violence. And this is a theme that exists in the books, although I would say that the show handles it very differently, in particular with Perrin's character, and it is up to audiences on whether or not you like it better than what is in the books. So that recap then leads to the opening sequence where we see the two rivers preparing for war, and this comes off of the end of the previous episode when Faile and Bane and Chiad see the Trollocs gathering in the mountains, and they realize that there is going to be a sizable attack that is preparing because this is an army and not just some roving bands that are creating destruction and commotion in the wilderness, but that this is a lot of troops who are organized in some fashion, and where the Two Rivers is going to get hit as the enemy of this army. So we see the Two Rivers preparing for war, but Perrin is not taking up a leadership role in the preparations for war the way he does in the books. And instead, we see him at the blacksmith's forge creating weapons and staying kind of out of all of the commotion, and instead it is Alana and Maxime who are the ones leading and training all of the Two Rivers people in preparation for this battle. And this little montage didn't work for my husband. He turned and said to me, making some kind of a comment that what he was really hoping to see was the Manetheren blood come through in this episode, that we would see Rand's dad and Matt's dad taking up leadership positions, having had previous army experience, at least for Rand's dad, who makes no appearance whatsoever at any point in this season, although they mention him at some point in an earlier episode. And instead it just really does look like a bunch of villagers doing their best with these kind of unsophisticated weapons, and Alana's warder taking the lead as the person who is trying to train them in preparations for this battle that is coming. And then we hear the bells. They have a bell, I guess, to alert that there are enemies approaching, and everyone is screaming that there are Trollocs coming, and even the men on the walls that are gazing out are saying, "Trollocs, Trollocs!" And Perrin gets closer and can see, because they're like 10 feet away, that it's not Trollocs, it's the Tuathawan. It's kids and women and men who are pacifists coming down the road looking for shelter. And we don't get like what we do in the book where people are just distrustful of the Tuathalan. Instead, they just come in, and what was confusing about this scene really was just why anyone thought that they were Trollocs. I did like seeing Aram again. My husband and I watched Bad Sisters on Apple TV, which I would recommend, and he is a very fun character in that show, and I recognized him after having, had a break from seeing him in season 1, and so it was nice to be like, oh yeah, that guy, I recognize him now. And he's enjoyable. He's an enjoyable character, I think, in the TV show, perhaps a bit more than he is in the books. I really don't like Aram in the books, but what they do with him in this episode is arguably less interesting than what happens in the books. It's a bit more cliche, I guess. It kind of feels like a repeat of what happened with Rand's visions in season 4, which might have been intentional, but we'll get to that momentarily. So the Tuathalan come in, and then Fael and Bane and Shead show up and tell Perrin what they saw about the Trollocs gathering in the wilderness, and Perrin announces that they will come for us tonight. I don't know how he knows that. I think he's just making an assumption that you saw them today, and when the sun falls, that's a good time to strike, so I guess they will probably come tonight. It is worth noting that Perrin's wolf powers are completely absent. Other than him having gold eyes, there is no indication that Perrin can dreamwalk, that he can talk to wolves, that he can summon the wolves for battle. None of that happens in this episode, so I'm just gonna put a pin in that, but and we'll come back to it. Maybe we'll see it in the final episode of the season, unclear, but we did not get that in the battle for the Two Rivers. There is a bit of Aram losing faith, foreshadowed at the beginning of the episode that then comes to pass later in the episode. I didn't like how the Maidens of the Spear call him a coward and then spit at him and call him a lost one. That does not square with how the Aiel should treat the Tuathalan, which we got all of that history in episode 4. So there should be more kind of wariness toward the Tinkers as opposed to active contempt. But they have changed that for the show, and they've also changed where Perrin stands when it comes to the Way of the Leaf ideology. And I remember this from season 1, so at least they're consistent within the show, where Perrin is the one who tries to convince Aram to retake up his religious ideology, if you want to call it that, his pacifism, that they're in a bad time right now, but spring will come again, so if he holds the line, he'll be able to make it. Perrin in the book is not a pacifist. He is never a pacifist. He is not fond of battle. He does not enjoy killing, but he is never at any point in the story, even in the first book, on the side of the Tinkers when it comes to the Way of the Leaf. He questions what it is that they believe, but he does respect the people, and he does try to protect them because they won't protect themselves. He is a protector. So having Perrin try to open this episode still claiming that he's a blacksmith, which he does in the books, to be fair, but not because he's a pacifist. And in this version, he is adopting the pacifist mentality and staying out of a leadership position for, I think, different reasons than he does in the book series. And I'm not sure that they are as compelling reasons, but mine's may differ. So we move to Alana, who is training these girls, Matt's younger sisters, how to channel. And there's not a lot of foundation for how channeling works in the TV show, but really this is not a good idea. It shouldn't be a good idea to utilize children in this way. But I guess Alana's going to make an exception because she doesn't want to die, and she's the only channeler in the village, so she's going to link with the girls and then just use their power. Which they do later in the episode. It does beg the question of how safe that is, because the last time we saw channelers linking, Egwene and Nynaeve burned out and almost died. Burned out literally as opposed to metaphorically the way it's used in the books. And, Egwene knelt by Nynaeve and healed her with her tears. So, and the girls didn't ask questions about whether it was safe or not. Instead, they just wanted to learn how to throw fireballs and asked Alana whether or not she can call lightning the way that Moiraine did in episode 1. And Alana demurred on that and didn't answer. She does note that the wisdom can also channel. We're not given a name for her. I don't know if this is Daisy Conger or if it's some other character. It's an unnamed character. But she joins in the circle because Alana badgers her into it. And then we have a scene where Masking is training all of the men how to use spears or pikes that are like handmade. And they say, why do we have to do this? We know how to shoot. Why can't we use a longbow? And Maskim's like, I don't know if you can do that, but like, I guess go get it. And then they don't practice with it or demonstrate that they're good at this skill until the nighttime or whenever it was that the battle takes place. Like, no one convinces Masking that they can use the bows. He just like gives them the benefit of the doubt, and then they show up later with the bows, and he's like, yeah, I guess they were better at that than I thought. So I think it's fundamentals like these that make the episode not work for me. It just feels the people writing this know absolutely nothing about battles, about fighting, about war. They did not read the chapters of the books. They're just kind of putting it together sloppily to create fight sequences, action sequences. The choreography is messy, but we'll get to it. But I think that is the fundamental problem that I was having with this episode. Fail points out the wolf banner, that the town has already created a wolf banner based on Perrin having golden eyes, and says, you love it, or you'll love it. And that she might have dropped rumors around the town that Trollocs are afraid of wolves, which I guess is enough for them to draw that connection. And then she encourages Perrin to take up the mantle of leadership, and he's still resistant, which is accurate to the books. And then he asked her about Lord Luke and whether or not he is going to help them. And I guess Lord Luke is with the White Cloaks. I am not sure what purpose Lord Luke serves in this story. He still hasn't said anything. It is possible that they're saving that for the final episode, and Lord Luke will reveal himself to be a secret villain that they didn't realize he was, or he'll just have some kind of a scuffle with Fail. I don't know. But apparently he's with the White Cloaks, and they're going to try to get the White Cloaks to help them defend the village. So Perrin meets with the White Cloaks and tries to get Dane Bornhald to bring his garrison into the town to defend it, and he doesn't want to because Perrin is a murderer. Perrin says, I'm not a dark friend. They don't really talk about that. They don't bring up his eyes or why it is that Dane thinks he's a dark friend. He says, you're a murderer. You murdered my father, which we pointed out in previous episodes wasn't really what happened in the TV show. There's a fight scene within the town of Falm, and everyone is killing everyone, and Perrin happens to get into it with one of the White Cloaks who attacks him, and it was Dane's father, and he died, and Dane was there and saw all of that. So I don't know where this murder charge is really coming from. And Perrin makes the statements like, well, you burned a woman alive in your camp like yesterday, and she was the mother of two girls, and now she's dead, and those kids are orphans. And he doesn't really react to that at all. Actually, they're not orphans because Matt's dad is somewhere. I don't know where. But Dane is not convinced by this argument. He tries to say that he wants justice. Perrin makes the argument that this is not justice. It's not even revenge. If you believed in the things that you supposedly believe, which we never really get an explanation of like what it is the White Cloaks believe, that they should do the right thing, which is to protect the village from shadow spawn. And then when Dane Bornhald doesn't take him up on that, Perrin says, look, I'll make a deal with you. If you defend the two rivers, I will give myself up and, to the justice of the light. And Dane still refuses. So no agreement was made, which makes what happens at the end of this episode really weird. But we'll come back to that. So then there is a very awkward scene with Bane and Chiad and Loyal, where he is writing a book that we have not really heard about or much about until now. He's writing about the things that he is seeing, not the Dragon Reborn specifically. In this case, he's writing about the Two Rivers. And they do a little bit of lore dropping with the owl sound in this area referencing old royalty, and the Maidens of the Spear pick up that Randall Thor might be descended from a royal line, which shouldn't matter to them because there are no kings or lords in the Aiel Waste, so that should be kind of a shrug on their part, but they seem impressed in the TV show. And then there is the most awkward scene ever where they ask Loyal to play Maiden's Kiss, and it's just, why? It's weird. And they show it later, and it's even weirder, but thankfully there is a break before we get there, but it's like not a good break because it immediately skips over to where Alana and Maskim are having more relationship drama about their bond, and he lies to her and brings her fruit that are not figs, and then says he has the fig and it's for him, and kind of mocks her, feeling his enjoyment of eating it through the bond, but like won't share it with her. And then they like kiss and start to hook up, and I just didn't care and don't need any of that. The amount of screen time that Alana and Maskim get in this season is just baffling to me. And I know it's because Rafe's boyfriend plays Maskim, and so he's getting like extra screen time. I feel like I know more about Maskim than I do about Rand in this show, if I'm going to be honest. I feel like he's got more lines and that he does more things, at least in this season, than the main characters do. It's just ear-hitting. Anyway, then we go back to Perrin, who's blacksmithing again, and Fael is approaching, and he tells her something about how if she wants to be sneaky, not to wear knives in her sleeves, which kind of suggests that he has super hearing. I know he has super smell. I didn't know about the super hearing, but I'm not sure that that's what that was supposed to indicate. I don't know. She mentions her father again, who she still hasn't given a full rundown on, so we don't know if it's the same guy as it is in the books. And they have a conversation about being afraid to die, and it's trying to be philosophical and thematic, and it's like it kind of works, but it didn't make me feel anything really, and just because there's like it's a very choppy way to tell a story. But they talk about dying and how Perrin is not afraid to die. He's afraid of other people dying, or specifically afraid of leading other people to their deaths. And then he tries to get Fael to leave because he doesn't want to see her to die, and they have kind of a thing going. And she refuses, and she comments that he must be afraid that he might put an axe in her, which he objects was a step too far, and I agree. Where did that come from? I want to point out in the books that this was all a lot more interesting when Fael and Perrin get married, and then he sends her away with a message to try to get help, knowing or at least expecting that he isn't going to live long enough for her to return. I don't think that they're going to do that because there's only one episode left, but, spoilers, in the books, Fael does agree to leave, but instead of going all the way to Camelin to ask the queen for help, she goes as far as Watch Hill and then brings one of the other villages back to save everyone, which was much, much better than what happened in this, at least in my opinion. In this, she refuses to leave. And then we go back to Loyal and Bane and Chiad, who are playing Maiden's Kiss with an Ogier, and it's just the worst thing I've ever seen. It made me so uncomfortable. It was so awkward. Like, why are these two, I think, lesbian women trying to play Maiden's Kiss with every man they come across, and then being dissatisfied every single time, and then always making these hints that they've killed lots of men for not kissing well enough? It's just awkward. It's worse with an Ogier because it just doesn't... I'm sorry, I didn't like it. Maybe you did. Write in the comments if you thought that scene was okay or was funny or something. I was cringing through the entire thing. And it gets worse when they have this conversation about how not killing Loyal for paying Maiden's Kiss means that they've met their toe, and then he tries to send them away, and they say that means that they have toe to him again because he's saving their lives, and it was just gobbledygook. It was not how Gia-To works. I don't understand how Gia-To works in the TV show. I don't think the writers care about how it works. I think they just say something and we'll move on. But it wasted my time. There's a short scene where Matt bonds with Perrin's sisters, which I guess they probably threw in here because there's been no interaction between Perrin and Matt's family. So they threw in something about him showing Matt blowing the horn of Valier, and his little sisters make fun of him because he's their brother and they don't see him as being a hero in any sort of way, and so they're kind of mocking this story about him, and I just didn't care about it. They mentioned that there are 5,000 Trollocs. At no point in this episode does it look like more than a few dozen, but it's probably due to budget constraints, so I'm not going to fault the show too much for how it tries to obscure what is actually happening in terms of a clash between armies or between forces. They mentioned this like convoluted plan about like trying to meet the Trollocs in the mountain pass and then like preventing them from getting to the village there and then having to fall back to the village and then fall back to the wine spring inn. And the tactics didn't really make sense. It's not like, I don't know, like I didn't really understand why the Trollocs would have to be restricted to using the mountain pass. They're like kind of animal-human hybrids, so I don't feel like passes are something that they need to utilize. They could just go through the woods or go around and get to the village in a lot of ways. So the tactics of that didn't make sense, but I think that they did it in order to have just like save on the number of armies, like the amount of people that you would need to show an army trying to take a village. I think that was the reason it was done. So as part of the planning, Perrin asked the Tuathawan if they would agree to flee with the children, which gives them something to do, and they do ask, why are we here? We are not going to pick up weapons to defend the village, even against Trollocs, and it is good that they can help in some way by fleeing with the children should that become necessary. I didn't understand what Perrin meant when he said no one can run as fast as the Tuathawan. Like, these are a meandering, traveling people that move slowly with wagons, and even the Aiel look at each other and are like, what? Like, it was just a weird comment to make. And then Loial announces that he will also be part of this plan because he is going to go and shut the Waygate, and Perrin tells him, once you shut it, don't come back, go to a steading and heal yourself. I don't know what Perrin means by this. How is Loial supposed to survive in the wilderness when there are Trollocs flooded everywhere between the Waygate and the True Rivers? What steading are there in the area that we know about where he would be safe? I don't know what that means. We will, get to like the quote unquote twist around this at the end, but the fundamentals of it were just, they were a little bit dodgy. Then we see the White Cloaks roll up in like the few horses that I guess the budget can allow for this season. And we see Perrin wearing armor, and I'm not sure why he's wearing armor that he made for himself and for no one else. That seems like a very in-character thing for Perrin to do. The Trollocs attack, and they're in the mountain passes. They're able to get away with showing fewer entities, like, coming through these defenses that they've built up in this mountain pass. And we hear a woman giving orders, and there are a bunch of dark friends with the Trollocs, which is not in the books, but is probably because it's easier on the budget to have humans mixed with the monsters. It's fine. The Waygate is guarded for some reason, so we, skip to where Loial and Bane and Shiad are trying to get to the Waygate, and there's like a bunch of people there, and Loial has a hammer instead of an axe. We get to see him fight a lot earlier in the show than we do in the books. Loial doesn't do a whole lot of physical fighting in the book series. We see Alana with the girls linked under her, and she is using them to cast some powerful magic. In this case, she casts Blizzaga for reasons, and the girls were like, that's way better than lightning. And it's like, okay, I guess it's like about the same really, but I don't know, she makes some storm clouds and some ice pillars fall from the sky and kill a bunch of Trollocs. And then it is announced that the Trollocs are issuing a tactical retreat, and that's not something that Trollocs are known to do, which means that someone must be controlling them. And this is weird for some reason or in some way. The mechanism of how the Trollocs are organized and how they're given orders has not been covered in the show. We haven't seen Trollocs, honestly, for a really long time. So a lot of things are just like not gelled, and we're hearing information for the first time as it's important, which contributes, I think, to why this episode felt like a mess, at least to me when I was watching it. Alana gets struck by an arrow again, because of course she does, and this one seems like it might kill her, despite the fact that the 6 she took before and then lived for days in just 2 episodes ago didn't really seem to be having much of an impact on her well-being. Just the complete randomness of how pain and healing works in the show is not consistent. I never feel afraid for characters that have names of actually dying. And then Masking takes over for the Two Rivers people and is shown ordering everyone and being the leader, taking the position that really Perrin should have in this episode. And it's not clear if Alana is dead or not. It's kind of assumed that she's dying and he's making a last stand. We go back to Loyal fighting with the maidens, and they have a conversation finally about the Avendasora leaf, which they've not mentioned until this point in the show after having used the Waygates multiple times in multiple seasons. This is the first time, as it is being used, that we are getting an explanation of how Avendasora leaves work, sort of. Instead of the leaf being attached to the gate, Loyal just carries one around with him and can use that to make the gate appear, and then but not to lock the Waygate. Instead, he has to go into the Waygate and destroy it physically in some way, despite the fact that it is magically constructed. The foundations for this are very dodgy, but we don't get to all of that right away. Alana is trying to get the girls to heal her again, but they're unable to embrace the source, probably because they were not paying attention to their lessons when they were asking her about throwing fireballs, and she was trying to get them to imagine buds opening, and no one took that instruction seriously, and now Alana is going to die. But she tells them that it's okay, it's fine, they're doing the best that they can, which they're children, and I guess we want to like Alana, so she's going to give kind of a rallying speech there. Then, by coincidence, or by good luck, or good fortune, the White Cloaks arrive with Lord Luke in tow, who still doesn't say anything, and they announce that they got through because the mountain pass was abandoned, there was nobody there, and then Padan Fain shows up, and Perrin says, "That guy's a dark friend," and everyone just believes him, because very shortly, the Trollocs attack, and Padan Fain turns on the villagers and turns on his own people, and Dane is like, "I didn't know that Fain was a dark one." I don't know, the way that the battle sequence takes place in the Two Rivers just didn't work for me. It's a melee, it's a massacre. You have these heavily armed White Cloaks who are under Dane, but maybe some of them are under Fain, and they're attacking the villagers, and Perrin keeps saying, "Hold the square," and I don't know what he's talking about. I know what a pike square is because it is deeply described in the books, when Matt uses it several times with the pikemen. But in this situation, there is no square. We never saw anyone learning what a square was, how to form one, and at the very least, it would be form a square, not hold a square, because this is a raid or a sudden betrayal that is happening from who they thought were going to be allies, and the Trollocs are just there suddenly. And there's also a part where they show all the women standing holding weapons, but they're not I don't know what they're protecting. They're hold the line. Okay, you're just standing in a line in the middle of the village. I think there's an implication that they're protecting the wine spring inn because that's where the children are, but they're just standing there holding spears. They're not being attacked. So holding the line isn't a phrase that really makes sense tactically in this situation. Then we skip back to where Loyal is trying to physically bring down the Waygate from inside it with his hammer, and it doesn't work because it's this magically constructed thing, which you would think that he would know, although it's never been explained in the show what the Waygates are or how they were grown by Ogier. So that would be useful information to know if you are a TV watcher and trying to figure out why Loyal thinks he can destroy this thing with a hammer, which I don't know why he does, but it would give it a little bit more credence if we knew that the Ogier were responsible for building the things in the first place. Again, we hear about this woman, Shianine, who is a character in the books, but is not here at this point in the story. And she's bringing more dark friends, and Bane and Shiad veil themselves to, defend the Waygate for Loyal, I guess, to eventually emerge, maybe. And then we see that the Tinkers are escaping into the woods with the children. So I guess the women are holding the lines that the children can escape with the Tinkers. But do they escape? No. They run into the woods. They are immediately attacked by Trollocs, which is like, why? Like, why? You should have stayed in the inn. This plan doesn't make any sense. These people are not... They're not having any hope of escaping. Aram is literally like carrying a baby, and they run out of the only safe place that's being defended and flee into the woods. They are all immediately picked off one by Trollocs. Back in the square, Perrin is losing hope, and Fail is trying to encourage him. They're just like hanging out around the blacksmith area with like lots of time to talk, I guess, while everyone is fighting and dying in the village square. And Perrin is looking at the banner and thinking it makes some kind of a difference, and then he like picks up a hammer, I guess, to join the fight for the first time, like at this moment in time in the middle of the fighting. Fail makes some kind of dropped commentary about, I like your women's circle, because they're, forming a square. They're not, but that's what she says. And then Valda shows up out of nowhere. We haven't seen him this whole episode, and he appears out of nowhere, and instead of caring about the Trollocs or his own White Cloaks or anything, he's just searching for Aes Sedai to kill, and he comes upon Alana, who's laying with the arrow through her, and he's about to kill Alana to add to his trophies, and then the girls stand up to him and light him on fire, and Alana laughs as he burns to death, which... Like, I wouldn't have minded the scene, it's not in the books, but I wouldn't have minded the scene if it had felt earned. But it felt random. It felt like the people doing things in this scene are doing them because the script calls for it, and not because that's what that character would actually do in that situation. Despite very much believing that Valda would want to kill Alana, it's just, in this situation, in this way, I didn't buy it. I didn't buy his reason for being there, and I didn't buy that the girls could turn into, ferocious murderers on a dime either. Even in revenge for their mother, whose death was legitimately horrible. I don't know. Padan Fain and Perrin have a fight where they come together to finish what they started back in Faldara in season 1, and Perrin gets the better of Fain, knocks him down, is about to kill him, and he has like the rage on his face, and we're seeing him like grappling with, like struggling, I guess, to decide whether or not to kill. I think this is supposed to be thematically linked to Perrin being a pacifist in the TV show, which again, he is not in the books. And we never see this scene in the books. This never happens, but they have a conversation about how Perrin wants to know why, Padan Fain, did you do all these horrible, evil things, despite knowing that he's an evil dark friend who also did something very similar in Faldara already. And then Padan Fain has to remind us that the Great Lord is a character that exists in this world, because we have heard nothing about the Dark One, or very, very little about the Dark One in a very long time in this show. And then he says that, we got thousands of Trollocs coming through the Waygate, and you'll never be able to stop them all. And then, of course, we go back to Loyal, who is singing a song in the Waygate, and I don't know if he's trying to, bring the Waygate down with the song, or if he's just trying to, boost himself to have one final stand. I think it's the latter. The Trollocs are coming, and he's going to hold the bridge or hold the line, and then he decides to use his hammer on the stones in front of the gate, and for whatever reason, that works better, I don't know why, than trying to destroy the gate with the hammer, because he just hits the ground a couple of times, and then the whole thing crumbles inexplicably for no reason. Outside the Waygate, Bane and Chiad are still fighting, and then Perrin sees a light in the sky that implies that the Waygate exploded or disintegrated, or whatever Waygates do when you destroy the bridge with a hammer, I guess. And Perrin puts two and two together that Loyal was successful and mentions that Fane smells afraid, so he's winning. He gives a little speech about how the two of us are just farmers, that none of us are soldiers, but you lost here anyway. Fane starts to try to bargain with him because he's in a losing position, and then Perrin's like, no, I'll make a deal with you, and then tells him to, like, run far away and never return. Take the Trollocs with you. Like, surrender, give up, and you can save your life. I don't know why Perrin just doesn't kill Fane if he's the one controlling the Trollocs. Wouldn't they also just give up when there's no one telling them to continue fighting? But again, the way the Trollocs are controlled and what they will or will not do is never fully explained. So in this version of the story, Fane is able to just start speaking Trolloc, and the Trollocs can hear him even though they're in the middle of a pitched battle, like spread out, 5,000 of them spread out in a large area, but they hear him and they all immediately abandon the fight and run away, and then everyone survives and lives, and Perrin and Fail kiss. And then there's like a mention of Will, who just like shows up out of nowhere. It's like a character that's in the books but has like had no build up in the show at all, so it's like, oh, Will's okay, good job, Will. Like, I don't know why he's in here. Alana's fine. Alana's shown to be just fine, and the girls talk about how she should take them back to the tower, back meaning Alana's going back, and then they would go with her because they've never been to the tower before. And she doesn't really answer. I'm not sure why she doesn't answer. One of the things that I skipped that happened earlier, back when the Tuatha were fleeing into the woods and they were all being picked off by Trollocs, was Aram picked up a dagger and stabbed a Trolloc and was, rejected by his people for abandoning the way of the leaf. This happens very differently in the books, but in this version, it kind of mirrored what happens in the histories that Rand sees in the glass columns. He saves the baby, I assume, and he now doesn't know what to do with himself because he has been with his people his whole life, and now that he's killed, they won't accept him. So one of the villagers, I think it's Egwene's mom, I can't remember, offers him a job as a blacksmith in the town. That doesn't happen in the books. I don't personally like Aram as a character in the Wheel of Time, but he did serve a purpose, and it was a different purpose than this. So one of the Tuatha giving up the Way of the Leaf to defend the town, and the way that Aram does that in the books is just different. Like, Aram actively picks up a sword and wants to learn how to kill and kind of goes crazy as a result of the kind of bloodlust and suppressed violence that he feels, having suffered all of this trauma in the course of his life. And Perrin encourages him to do it and then is saddled with him and responsible for him in subsequent books. And it's a frustrating plot line, but it had more thematic interest than what happens here, because there's really nothing that makes you think that Aram made a bad decision in the TV show. I think when you're holding a baby and you're being attacked in the woods by a half-human, half-bestial monster, killing it with the knife that is available seems like a very logical thing to do. That is very different from Aram picking up a sword and really just wanting to kill people. And that's what he does in the books, and Perrin has to grapple with whether or not he told Aram the right thing to do and try to, like, counsel him and not be very good at it for many subsequent books. Again, not my favorite character in the books. Do really like this actor in the TV show, so I liked it a little better, and it's a bit more understandable and a bit more defensible in the TV show. And maybe they simplified it, intentionally for a reason. I think what Robert Jordan was trying to do with it was to show that sometimes the path to violence is the wrong one. Aram probably should not have picked up the sword. He was not the type of person who knew when to throw it away, and that was part of the contention that Perrin always feels, where he hates violence, but he's not a pacifist, and he's always worried about becoming a monster. The minute Aram picks up a sword, he is starting on that path of being a monster because he is very excited about using that sword. Regardless, it's different in the TV show. And then we hear in kind of an epilogue that Loyal is dead, probably, in the Waygate. We never actually saw him die, and this is now the second season that almost ends with Loyal being presumed dead, and we don't know if he really is dead. Now there is one more episode to go, so we might see Loyal again in episode 8, or they might wait until season 4 to tell us whether or not Loyal survives. I could see the TV show deciding to off Loyal just because his character may have served its primary usefulness at this point in the story. Loyal has a lot of nice things in the books, but it does feel very stretched out, and they've cut a lot of the characters and a lot of the other things that would give Loyal something to do in later seasons. So maybe he's really dead. I don't know. They read passages of his book that he left behind, which is their evidence, that, I guess, that he's dead, where he talks about how the Red Eagle of Benetherin has become a wolf, and then he talks about how Perrin is, the person that people want to follow. And then we have the White Cloaks confront Perrin in the town, and Dane tells him that he needs to now surrender to the Light's justice because it had a deal. They did not have a deal. Dane rejected the deal at the beginning of the episode, so it does not make sense for Perrin to surrender himself. It makes even less sense than when he was contemplating doing it in the book. In the book, the White Cloaks do show up, but they don't fight. They just sit on their pretty horses and they watch all of the Two Rivers defend their own town, and then Perrin tells them, get out of here at the end, and doesn't surrender himself. In the TV show, he surrenders himself, and I don't know why. Faile tries to prevent him from doing it. All the townspeople cheer and start hailing him as Lord Perrin Goldeneyes as he's shackled and led between the White Cloaks, presumably to his death for being a dark friend. None of them try to fight the White Cloaks. No one tries to stop him, seriously from doing this, and the reason that he did it at all is very questionable. I don't know why Perrin thinks that he needs to surrender himself to the White Cloaks at the end of this episode. So that's how it ends, and I think that I'm supposed to feel emotionally distraught that Loyal is dead and that Perrin is being led away in chains, but I'm supposed to be on an emotional high for the Two Rivers having fought off the Trollocs and Perrin having convinced or defeated Fane and convinced him to leave the Two Rivers in peace, despite that not really being Fane's choice as a dark friend and not the type of person that I would expect to keep any kind of promise. So I don't know, just looking at this episode holistically, there's a lot of action sequences, and depending on how much you care about choreography and this kind of thing, this might have been a fun watch, but to me, the fundamentals of why they're fighting, how they're fighting, what the emotional lows and highs are, felt very messy and very rushed, and not in a good, this is accurate to how battles work way, but in we did a draft of this and just kind of went, yeah, that works, and put it into production. And that's the problem that I kind of have with the show throughout. I have to wait until the entire season completes because there is one more episode. Maybe I will change my mind about some of it. I do read what other people think, and I see that a lot of people really, really like this show. I personally think that they are reacting to the things that come through that are from the books. And if you had read the books and then watched the show, it's not as enjoyable. I think you can still enjoy aspects of it, and people do, especially if you don't remember the books very well. But I think if you just read the scripts, by themselves, without all of the incredible actors, the incredible cast that they have for this, without the costumes and the music and all the things that make a TV show exciting, that the flaws would be much more glaring. And unfortunately, because I'm a writer, I can't not pay attention to that stuff. Lately, my husband and I have been watching a lot of TV that's not fantasy, where it just relies entirely on character development and plot sequence, and it's such a overwhelming difference to watch a show that's just very well plotted with very clear characters who do things that make sense for the types of people that they are as they are presented in the writing, compared to something like this, which just feels very cheesy. I don't know, it's the kind of word that comes to mind for me in looking at it. So it wasn't that this episode was terrible, it wasn't awful, it just didn't hit emotionally in the way that I wanted it to. I was really hoping that this episode would be similar to episode 4 and that they would stick with kind of the main structure of what happens in the Defense of the Two Rivers that happens in the books, and it just disappointed. It wasn't as good. So I know a lot of people were like, I'm not going to watch you anymore because you're so negative and I'm enjoying the show, but that's fine. That's fine. These are raw reactions. You don't have to listen to me if you really enjoy the show and don't want to listen to someone rip it apart. I totally get that. My views on this are not high, and that's fine. These are my raw reactions. When I go back and do the entire season, in retrospect, I will potentially be more generous toward it, or my reasons for picking it apart will at least be more thought through and critical. So one more episode to go, and this season will have wrapped. So if you are enjoying it, put that in the comments. You can disagree with me. If you don't enjoy it, let me know what you specifically didn't enjoy. If you think these characters are hitting, whether they are the same or different from the books, let me know that. But overall, I found this episode underwhelming. It wasn't as bad as finales have been in previous seasons, but it didn't slap. Not for me personally. So we will see if the last episode is a banger. It certainly has the potential to be based on the source material that they're going to be able to draw from, but this show has a history of not hitting the finales. So we might love it, we might hate it, and we'll find out. So until next time.